And even though the Han supermajority is over 90% of the population, the regions are so distinct that there's a lot of identities even within the ethnicity. North on the Yellow River, you've got the North China Plain, which is where about half the Chinese population lives, and it has always been tight in the grip of Beijing. In the south, you've got the cities from Shanghai going down to Hong Kong, which have always been a little secessionist and more integrated with foreign zones, especially when it comes to their food supply. So they've always had their own identity. And then in the middle, you've got the Yangtze River from Shanghai to Sichuan that has always been the most sophisticated and value-added and functional part of the Chinese economic system. And has usually resisted Beijing's rule, but they're still quintessentially Chinese. Ruling this is difficult because it means each region, each city has its own identity, its own idea of what should happen and not happen, and how to put it all together. And then in Beijing, you've got the emperor who has to manage all of this, and it means that China tends to oscillate wildly between two conflicting visions. On the one hand, there's local autonomy. You've got the locals who are determining what happens. They have a saying in China that the emperor is far away. And so the Chinese system tends to spin apart into dozens of competing systems. On the other hand, you've got the emperor who tries to hold it all together and tends to over-centralize as a result. And combining those two themes means that China has the most war-torn and internecine, conflicting history of all of the major cultures of all the world. Now, in the leadership years before Xi, this is not Mao, but his successor Deng Xiaoping, and moving on from them, there was this idea that there had to be a degree of balance. So leadership involved the south, the central sections, and the north, although the north was very clearly in charge, and the center was very clearly in the second position. But by the time we got to Xi, the decision was made that it's time for somebody who can represent all the regions, and Xi was brought in as kind of a compromise candidate, and then he took over. In his first 5-year terms, it was a massive, what he called an anti-corruption campaign, but it was really a purge of all the competing power centers throughout the party and throughout the system. And whether you had a different view of what China should be or how to get there, you were kicked out. And if you were a local regional power boss, you were brought to heel. In the second 5-year term, Xi went after everyone who agreed with him to make sure that no one was capable of independent thought in his area. And that has made him the most isolated world leader on the stage right now, arguably the most isolated in Chinese history, and he's now more shut off from everything and all sources of information than even the Kim dynasty of North Korea. And so we are seeing catastrophic policy decisions being made in economics and trade with COVID and security. And for the bureaucracy, you kind of go one of two ways. Option number one is you are a true believer and you think that Xi is the second coming, and so when you see him say something, you snap to and do your interpretation of it in the most zealotous way you can come up with. This is one of the reasons why the lockdowns in places like Hong Kong have gotten so extreme, and why you've got some idiots out there who are sanitizing airport runways because they think that's what Xi wants them to do to fight COVID. But the vast majority of the bureaucracy, knowing that if they get brought to Xi's attention, good or bad, it could be a disaster, they just don't do anything unless they're specifically told. So we're seeing a seizing up through the entire system because we have a leader that is so disconnected from everything. He's making decisions without any information whatsoever because nobody wants to bring it to him. And that means that the Chinese system now, its greatest threat, the greatest threat to the Chinese system, the greatest reason to expect the Chinese system to collapse in the foreseeable future is the leadership. We think we have a problem in the United States going back and forth from W to Obama to Trump to Biden and all the issues and inconsistencies with that. It's nothing compared to the complete information lockdown that now exists at the very top in the Chinese system. Okay, next time I'm sure we're going to have to talk about Putin because, wow. All right, everyone take care. See you soon. Hey everyone, Peter Zeihan here, still in DC, coming to you from the Kennedy Center. We're talking about leadership, and the next person I wanted to talk about is Vladimir Putin. Now, ruling the Soviet system / Russian system isn't nearly as much of a challenge as you might think. Yes, you've got billions of restive minorities. Yes, your national security strategy rests upon basically enslaving them and turning them into cannon fodder, but you do so via a very simple method. You use an intelligence service that infiltrates everything within your country, and whenever there is a hint of dissent, you stamp it out lethally and quickly. And when you have a system like that, you basically base your government on information control, and as long as a security apparatus is functioning, you can then press gang the entire population to do whatever you want. It's not particularly efficient from an economic point of view, but Russia has existed for nearly 4 centuries in its current form, more or less, and it put into position a kind of strategic stability within the country that is fairly durable. Now, the Putin government is the successor of a coup that happened